Welcome to Chief Evangelist. I'm your host, Ethan Beute. I'm on a mission to explore and understand the role of the Chief Evangelist and the movement behind it. How should CEOs be thinking about it? How does it benefit the company? Which companies and markets need evangelism most? What is the work involved? What does success look like? And who's a good fit as a Chief Evangelist? That's what we're exploring at chiefevangelist.com and in conversations like this one. Today, we're learning from the Chief Evangelist at Authenticx. She transitioned into that role and title after serving as Chief Customer Officer for nearly 2 years, with previous roles titled Director of Client Services, Director of Market Strategy and Insights, and VP of Customer Experience. She's built her career by helping global companies develop customer experience strategy. Leslie Pagel, welcome to Chief Evangelist.
It's great to be here, Ethan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've loved our conversations in the past. We've talked about, I know a little bit of this story, but we'll get into it probably in even more detail about how you made your way into a Chief Evangelist role and title, how it's going. You're several months in now. And so this is going to be a really unique go at it here on this podcast for the freshness of it. But we're going to start, Leslie, before we get into all of those details and more, with the first standard opener, which is what is the most important job of a Chief Evangelist?
Well, I'm still learning, but here's where I'm at right now. I feel like the most important job that I have is to open the eyes of business leaders for the importance of what we do at Authenticx is we help healthcare organizations listen to the voice of the customer, the authentic voice, the everyday interactions that customers are having. And so, in my role, what I found to be the most important thing is to open the eyes of business leaders to why that's important, why it's important to listen to the conversations patients, doctors, pharmacists are having every day. Open their eyes to the the capability. And what I mean by that is um, the technology exists today that allows them to listen to these interactions and conversations. Open their eyes to the power of a conversation, why conversations are so important. It is how we learn, it's how we grow, it's how we connect with each other, it's how we come to a common understanding and common ground. It's through conversation. So, even just talking about the role of conversations is something that I found myself doing a lot to really just help open the eyes that listening to customers is it's not about doing a survey. It's about leveraging all the interactions that you're having with your customers and getting as much value and insight from those so that you can guide the business. So I would say it's about opening eyes, and there's a lot of different categories that I spend my time talking with business leaders about to help them kind of see a new reality around a voice of customer and customer listening.
So good. There's so many things in there I like. I want to go first to this idea of opening eyes. We've heard that language, not that exact language, but the spirit of that, which is helping people think differently, creating some, you talked about this too, creating some problem awareness. I have a
Mhm.
problem or an opportunity that I'm blind to. It never occurred to me. And so this idea that, so I'm not searching Google for it. I'm
Mhm.
not asking people what they use to solve this thing because I don't really even know about it, which is an interesting thing. The power of conversation, there's so much there. It's one of the reasons A, I love podcasting. And B, I think it's as kind of I'm inferring from what you said or hearing in what you said, is that voice of customer isn't just the tallying in all of this. It's the literal
Yes.
voice of the customer, as well as all the assembled pieces that make the voice clearer or reinforces some things we think we heard and these types of things. Talk to me a little bit about where are we on the innovation curve relative to healthcare and relative to what Authenticx is doing? I feel just by what you said that this is not standard thinking,
Mhm.
and that there is a need to create more problem or opportunity awareness. I mean, you almost just said all of that, but speak to it specifically in the context of what Authenticx is doing and why it makes sense to have someone out in front in a way that marketing and sales aren't necessarily doing,
Mhm.
in a more pure functional way.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that it is new. And part of that is because it's new technology. It's one of the benefits of artificial intelligence and machine learning is that we can take really messy data. Conversations are infinite, where you're never going to have this conversation ever again. And that happens every day within healthcare companies, within any type of business. And, historically, the technology didn't exist to bring that in. It's always been there to capture it. We say it's been stored and ignored. You have it. But now the technology exists to bring it in and to really understand what is in those nuggets, those infinite data sources that companies have. So the technology exists, artificial intelligence, machine learning, but I have to tell you, nothing replaces listening as well. And, when you listen with human ears, you hear context that a machine can't quite yet communicate. You hear a mother talking about her child that recently committed suicide or attempted suicide. You hear situations that are happening, someone who can't get their refill, and they're running out of medication. They tell healthcare organizations this in a conversation. Machine learning helps us capture it, analyze it at scale. But when you listen with human ears, you understand a context that brings it to life that you cannot unhear. And I'll tell you, Ethan, the other thing that happens is it drives action. Because when you put this in front of business leaders and they're hearing the voice of their customer data backed, the machine's telling us this is happening in this percent of your population, and here's what it sounds like, it prompts action in the business. So that's another kind of outcome as well.
Again, so much I appreciate about that, specifically this idea of human listening. It's interesting, in, the second book that I wrote with, my friend Steve, we interviewed a guy who's like a has 7 US patents in the analysis of facial coding data. He's an emotional intelligence type of expert, and we spoke with him at length about where we are in terms of machines being able to read emotions in voices and from faces, and he referenced a couple different people, and to your observation, it's not on the immediate horizon. It's very like, machines are very good at getting all of the words and looking at very, very large quantities of words. But this
Mhm.
idea of tone and pace and urgency or concern or excitement or all these subtleties that are in there, and you and I are both parents, and so there's this idea of like, listen, sweetheart, it's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? In a
Mhm.
corrective situation. And so there's just so much richness um, in this listening. Walk me into, because I know you have some background in healthcare, you have a lot of background in customer experience. Talk about you and Authenticx, 2.5 years ago. How did you meet them? How did they meet you? Chief Customer Officer. Just talk about that as a lead into the transition from Chief Customer Officer to Chief Evangelist.
Okay. Yes. So I will say my introduction to Authentics, it started probably 25 years ago when I started this work of voice of customer out of college. I was fortunate to find an organization that I spent 20 years at. And what I did there was I learned a lot about market research. I learned a lot about customer loyalty and how to build loyalty. This was before customer experience was even a thing. Like it didn't have an acronym yet, it didn't have a label. And so I was very fortunate to find myself at an organization learning about um, information, data, insights, customer intelligence that inform a business about the relationship that customers have with them. And historically, this has been driven by survey data. So the voice of the customer, customer understanding, has largely been by asking customers, "Hey, will you fill out our survey?" I'll tell you, Ethan, when I first started, we called them on the phone, and technology's changed. So when I left that organization, I went to a large health insurer company, and I was very interested in being more the practitioner instead of the vendor or the consultant to a company, putting myself in the business and, seeing what this is like. What can I do? And so at that point, when I joined that organization, I got introduced to our founder, Amy Brown. Amy had recently left her corporate job. She was the COO at an organization, very successful, and she had this calling that was all around the voices that are stored and ignored in an organization, and wanting to amplify them, wanting to bring those voices to the table in healthcare organizations. So she started Authenticx through networking. We got connected, and I immediately became a evangelist, I would say, because what I saw her doing is filling this gap in customer experience that has always been there. And the gap was the data source. Surveys are very kind of rear view mirror. How do you feel about us? Well, those feelings are because the interactions that they've had, where she's taking the interaction and she's saying, I'm going to analyze the interaction. And through this, that's going to shape future perceptions, future feelings, future behaviors. And the other gap that has always been around in customer experience is action. A lot of customer experience professionals talk about how they can't get action. And, that was another thing that really drove me looking at Authenticx and considering it. Amy and I talked. So Amy started her business. I was a super fan, would tell all the people about it. And then one day we started talking about me joining the organization. I joined in a chief customer officer position, really focused on helping companies get value out of this data source, helping our team understand the business problems that our clients are facing, and then using the data that they already have to help inform those business problems. And then our evolution at Authenticx is we're in high growth mode. And we're at a point where we're also disrupting a market in terms of customer listening and customer understanding. And Amy was at the point where she wants someone out there with her advocating for a better way of listening and demonstrating that customers are being heard within an organization. So she asked me to take the chief evangelist role. And, I was already an evangelist, so I couldn't really turn her down.
Yeah, so much good stuff there. And by the way, I missed the opportunity to say I love this language of stored and ignored. It's one of those things that, and you hear it a lot in these conversations on this podcast, little turns of phrase, language that really captures the essence of the problem in a really clear way, and in a way that I know that leaders who you're trying to get into conversation with, leaders who you're trying to open up to the conversation, leaders who need to um, understand that there's an opportunity that they're blind to, the stored and ignored people in all kinds of businesses can relate to that. So I really appreciate that. Um, so what I heard there is that Amy is also an evangelist, that you're coming
Mhm.
alongside her in this mission. Um, why you? Like I heard that you were a fan and even a super fan before joining the company in the first place. Um, talk to me about like the visionary nature of this. Like there are leaders who know that we need to be doing more of this, but sometimes that turns into we need a bigger ad budget, or
Mhm.
we need, more content marketing, or we need to sponsor more things going on in our industry. Talk to me about this idea of evangelism as the path forward to, because I'm sure this was like you're the first person in this role, obviously, in this organization. Um, so that like to the degree you can, tell me a little bit about that process. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to say we need to create more awareness, not just about Authenticx as a company among a variety of options, like in a more commoditized space, but we need to create the market for this thing. We need to create more awareness that there's an opportunity that these organizations are blind to and they really need to understand. We have a compelling message, we have a great solution for it. Let's run a bunch of ads or sponsor a bunch of things or create a whole bunch of content that speaks to the things that people are searching for today, but walks them into this new way of thinking. There are lots of different ways to solve this, is what I'm
Mhm.
saying. What do you think it was about Amy or you or the market or the way that you all operate that made evangelism part of this solution set that for the problem that you all have or the opportunity that you have?
I think that we are definitely a both and company. So, and that goes, throughout our organization. So when it comes to disrupting a market, it's a both and response. So yes, we're investing in marketing, we're investing in our sales team and building them. And, I am helping to support them through my role, but there's also the both and, which is about um, a, a- an additional way of thinking about capturing voice of share, and capturing the attention, and that's their people, and we're a really human oriented business. Our mission is to help humans understand humans. And so, this idea of having an evangelist that has spent her entire career around this problem that companies are trying to solve, and sees very clearly the gap that Authenticx is filling and solving that problem is a both and kind of response to disrupting the market.
Yeah, I think that the human language is really the key here. I mean, it's one of my primary MOs in deciding to start this show and run it the way that I am is that I do think there's something uniquely powerful about human to human interaction. I think there is something uniquely powerful about feeling the way that someone expresses it and not just reading it off of a blog post or a flyer or a social post or any of these other things that were emailed, other things that we're putting in front of people. And I appreciate that the values or the operating principles come through in the way that you're, spreading the message as well. Chief Customer Officer to Chief Evangelist. I have not heard that one yet, besides when we first met. People generally, a number of them are positioned in marketing and or came out of marketing, or they came out of they were practitioners, and you definitely share
Mhm.
that quality as well. They were practitioners of the thing, and therefore they're great at relating to um, people who should be in these conversations because they were that person. So I definitely think you have that there. I also am speculating here, and then I'll give it to you for like clarification to like reinforce anything I said or add some more specific color to it. But obviously, as chief customer officer, I assume that you were in a ton of customer conversations. You know the voice of customer. Um, you have a lot of stories. I'm sure you were getting on calls with some of your best accounts on a regular basis. And these are all assumptions of mine. And so there's a much stronger parallel there than I think than it might look on paper. That you make a lot of sense for this role. Talk about what chief customer officer was for you relative to what chief evangelist was for you, 3, 4, 5 months ago at the dawn of this mission that you're on, and then we'll get into that mission.
Sounds good. So I would say, as the chief customer officer, it is always about value. People would ask, how do you measure success? And it's a hard thing to measure because value looks different for every client. But that is the ultimate measure of customer success is what value is the client getting out of the organization. So that's how we spend our time. And we spend our time today is really understanding the problem they're looking to solve and helping them solve it and understanding that value for them. That has not changed for me. The value component is the same. The value of is different. So for me now, it's about the value to the healthcare industry and having an impact on healthcare. We last year analyzed over 100 million conversations in healthcare. It is broken. There's a lot, that's nothing we don't already know, right? But this is about really, this role to me is really about delivering value to an industry now. And it's a value of really, truly listening to everyone. We're all consumers of healthcare and hearing them and then doing something about it. So very similar. It's just kind of the recipient of the work is different.
Yeah, I really appreciate that we leveled that up from customer accounts and customers and the people in those accounts. I don't mean to dehumanize people by calling them accounts. Um, Leveling that up to the entire industry, that makes a ton of sense. This is a very specific, detailed question, but I think it's a really interesting one that anyone listening has been adjacent to, if not directly challenged with. So this is a little bit of an aside, but I agree with you that value is difficult to measure. I think sometimes for customers, value is even difficult to articulate.
Yes.
But how often would you say, and you don't need to make it specific to Authenticx, but just to this idea of we need to help our customers get value. We need to understand what value is to them. Then
Mhm.
we need to decide on the sales side and the marketing side and the qualification side, can we actually deliver meaningful value to them with the solutions that we have?
Mhm.
Now, post sale, that's been agreed upon. And now how often would you like talk about that challenge of um how often is that a quantified value and companies are saying, look, I'm looking to move this number by 20%, or I'm looking to reduce this thing by 18%, or versus how much of it is, I want things to be easier for my team members so they can be more available to our customers. Like, just
Mhm.
talk about the challenge there of helping people, because my in my experience, not everyone even know, they feel like I should be doing this. I need a solution, and I like you all. I like interacting with you. My friend said something nice about you, so I'm choosing you. But I'm not really even clear on the value that I should be getting here, and or I may be too immature in my business, or this is so innovative that I don't even know how to put a measure against my normal operations. I know there's a lot there, but speak to that challenge because I think it's something all of us can relate to, and I feel like you have a
Mhm.
unique perspective on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the ultimate is to be able to say, through our partnership, this thing moved, and there's an infinite number of things that can move from um, outcome metrics, revenue retention, to employee engagement metrics, to very specific improvements and initiatives that we identified and, the client did something with. So having the hard metrics is the ideal measure of value because it's clear. that hard metric, that kind of hard, not, it can be hard to achieve too, because it requires the business to do something, more than just consume insights, but to use them to drive action, to measure the progress. And that takes time. So there's also the other kind of indicators of value. And those are things like how many people are asking for insights. Are you hearing a demand from the business to learn more from the work that you're doing? Are the frontline staff engaging in the insights as well? Because there's a huge part of what we do that really is about recognizing the humans in the business who are serving customers and supporting and helping them. That's another indicator as well. So there's soft indicators of value that are equally important, and they lead to being able to capture the hard data that companies and leaders want as they make decisions. And then, I'll echo your thought or your comment, Ethan, about sometimes they don't know. Sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes we play a role in helping clients understand the types of value indicators that they can use and monitor as a result of rich and deep listening to their customers.
Very good. Thank you for that. Um, Doubling back a little bit into the role, evangelism, chief evangelist. Initial thoughts, initial questions. What did you wonder about? What were you excited about? What were you concerned about? Like, what's your initial reaction now? Because this happened near the top of the year.
Yeah, it started last year, at the end of last year. So I would say the initial thought was, I don't know what this is, and can we talk about the title? There's, just the initial kind of reaction. But I started researching. And as I started researching, I found your podcast, listened to every single one of them, reached out to other evangelists, everyone, including yourself, opened their kind of ears and hearts to listening to me and helping me and guiding me. And once I did some of that initial kind of understanding of what this is, um, it hit me that one, this makes a lot of sense. Amy, you are brilliant. And two, let's go for it, but the initial kind of reaction was a little bit of uncertainty. I wanted to know about travel. Am I going to be gone from my family all the time? Things like that. Like, how will my life change as a result of this? But uh it once I did the research, it became really clear to me why we're creating the role and why me as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I love your approach. Anything surprise you in your research journey out of the gate?
Um, this wasn't a surprise, but it was a little bit of a fear um, that this role of chief evangelist isn't established. So, I wasn't surprised by that, but it was one of those things that it's like, oh crap, what am I going to do? Where am I going to start? Um, the other surprise, I would put this in the surprise camp, is, there's this reaction to the title because it's new, people don't know it. And the surprise for me is I've really come to appreciate the title. I did push back. Like, can we talk about this? And the more that I've dug into it and explored it, the more that I've embraced this title of Chief Evangelist as being a perfect title for the role as well. Um, I'll add one more. One of the conversations I had And I wish I could remember who this was with. So I feel really bad about this. And um, but one of the kind of networking conversations I had opened my eyes to the role of the chief evangelist is also within the business. It's also about creating evangelists for everyone at Authenticx. And I hadn't thought about that. So that was one of the gifts that actually you gave me through kind of your podcast series. I targeted all the people that had been in the podcast and said, "Hey, can I talk with you?" and learned that. So that was a surprise as well.
That's super. That's kind of a those is an interesting thing for me too. And as I reflected on my role off and on over the years, it was really there were a couple of projects that I had turned my focus inward, and I realized the power and really even the hunger for people to understand or to be reminded of. I mean, I just think about in this conversation that you and I are having now, at the beginning of it, you already identified yourself as a super fan before you joined them. And so there was some degree of that for everyone who joined the company. They didn't just say, this sounds like decent work for decent pay. There's probably something else that kind of lit them up to have them, transition from one opportunity to another or to pick Authenticx over another company. And it's sometimes it's just a matter of being reminded of the
Yeah.
success stories, being reminded why we're doing this, being reminded that we are a very human first company. And you with your and now we'll get a little bit into kind of how you fit in operationally. I assume there's a little bit of distance from some of the guts of the operation now in a way that you
Mhm.
didn't have as chief customer officer that gives you the space to have more conversations with other
Mhm.
people inside and outside the organization, curate and cultivate the stories and the questions and the themes and bring those back to the company at large directly and perhaps through other leaders and just creating this feedback loop that ideally would bring people back to life. I want to double back though into just because your language was really clear on it and I want to hear more. Um, you really appreciate the title relative to the work and the challenge and the mission. Talk about what you believe is so good, or how you came around. We don't even need the path of how you came around to seeing it, because most people are a little bit resistant to the title out of the gate, like, I don't
Mhm.
know about that. But you're so I think you might have even used the word perfect or perfectly. Um, Talk about the fit of the spirit of the work or the work relative to the title.
So I would say the fit relative to the title is that when it's the mind's eye, when you say evangelist, people create a thing in the mind's eye and it lines up with the role, you know? And that mind's eye is someone out there, someone talking passionately about what they care and love. And that's what we see. That's what the word creates in our head. And that's what the work is. Now, there's a lot that goes behind getting out there in front of people and speaking and all that. Um, but I would say it's the mind's eye. It creates kind of the perfect fit because the word creates this image that lines up with the responsibility.
Really good. I love it. That's great language too. So late last year, you say, "Okay, I believe in your vision. We're going to do this." You create a transition plan to turn over the operation, the probably the entire post sale operation, and you're just and you're lining up and moving into this completely new role and function, probably unlike anything else you've ever done. What were some of the initial either activity areas or goals or like how did you like what were so like as you and Amy were deciding how to how to turn this into a thing,
Mhm.
what did that look like? What did that look like in conversation or what did that look like on paper? Like what did you set out to do over the
Mhm.
past few months and how is it going so far?
Yeah. So, it all started with Me trying to get as close to an understanding of what Amy is looking for as an outcome. And, I was really, it was helpful to hear that that was big. It wasn't about sales conversions, and it was like about share of voice in the market and kind of bigger brand awareness things. And that's not just on me. That's, the whole company is responsible for that. So having an understanding of the expectations of this role and the clarity of how it fits in with the other work that's happening. And then from there, I did a lot of research, still am, and ended up creating pillars of focus. And the pillars for this year that I've said are exposure, getting out in front of people as much as possible. I learned from your podcast that's a size of one or thousands, but it's about getting out there, exposure in podcasts, exposure in one on one meetings, all of that. Content was the other pillar. It's about thought leadership, contributing through the work that we do, giving back from all the work that we do through content. And then there's another component of my job that's about storytelling. We really want to democratize storytelling in business because data backed storytelling. So there's an element of my responsibility that is about in figuring that out. How are we going to help business leaders um, and business professionals become data backed storytellers? And then the fourth pillar is an internal one. Spending my time working throughout Authenticx, helping our associates connect to the purpose, understand the purpose, connect to it, and get excited and engaged about it.
I really like these 4 pillars very much. What was your I mean, you've already described a little bit of the process, but how long from I need to put some shape to this idea that sounds really interesting and exciting, I've come around to it. I think the title is interesting now. I need to put some shape to this. I'm listening to Amy. I'm listening to other people who have done this work. I'm thinking about what's going on in our company. What was the ballpark timeline from I need to put some shape to this to I have these 4 pillars, which seem very clear. And now I can see a path where you're now lining out the main activity areas. And then you're lining out maybe, how do I know I'm being successful here? Is this just going to be an activity measure? Or is there actually a measurable outcome to this? But it all starts with this idea of having this clear set of pillars.
Mhm.
What was the timeline from, "I need to put shape to this," to, "I have these 4 pillars and I feel pretty good about them"? Because 'Cause I'm sure that even that was an iterative process.
It was 1 week.
Okay.
If that gives you any insight to how I need to operate, like I need, part of it was driven from my own personal need, and that was for some structure. Now, I'll tell you, so Amy and I had conversations in December. So I'm not counting the December time where I was starting to think forward and as well I was transitioning out. But 1 week into the job, second week of January, I had the pillars, I had a vision of 2023 by the end of the year and things that I was going to do in Q1 to help work towards that. It's changed, all those things, weren't the best things to be working on. I really I like structure. I also love to iterate. So it's just about what are the things and then what are we going to do now? And then we're going to evolve along the way. So one
Very
week.
good. I know that, you're still early to it, but you're also very active in engaging with people directly. You're very thoughtful about the work. I'm sure as you made this transition in your own career, people were like, "Leslie, what's this about?" Um, how are you, advising or talking with any, like, leaders, founders, executives who are wondering, that's interesting. Do I need this? Like, what would you share with someone who reached out to you or engaged with you in that manner?
Yeah. I would start by saying, I don't have many of those conversations. But if I were to, I would, I would ask some questions to understand the why. But if the why was clear, I'd talk about the person. It's the person's an important, and the person probably exists because they're doing it. They're doing it already. They're advocating already. They're the evangelists already, and also would need to have some experience. The thought leadership piece of it, I've found to be critical. I've been in this industry for 20. I can talk about how it's changed, how it's evolved, where and you need someone, some years on earth to contribute to that is important. And then I would talk about structure and support as well. That, a chief evangelist is about kind of being in demand, having people want to, but that takes time and it takes support to create it. So thinking through some of the things that are needed for that chief evangelist to be successful as well.
Yeah, very good. What go to that why one more step into that. Like, because I like that. And usually when I ask a question like that, it's like, what advice would you share with them, and or what follow-up questions do you have? And so this speak a little bit to how you just go back into that why a little bit. Like, what are some whys or some signs that someone might look around and find this type of person who you wisely identified through some key
Mhm.
characteristics?
Yeah. Well, one would be disrupting a market, really um, being the new person in a crowded market that has a unique offering. So try to understand, but that's my situation. So that would be the why I'd be listening for. What I would, what I would really be listening for, Ethan, is that they're not doing this because it's the latest fad. Like that's the why not, Don't do it because Authenticx just did it and this one did. Do it because there's a business reason for it and you believe in it. So I think I'd be listening for those two things.
Yeah, it's perfectly fair. I didn't get to this, and it's kind of a minor detail, but how are you structured in the organization now? Do you report directly to Amy? Are you like a free agent about the organization? Like, talk about your own structure a little, just for a minute.
Yeah, I do report directly to Amy. And I partner closely with the other leaders, with our sales team, with our marketing team, with our client success team. And then, you try to be a helpful input into product roadmap, things like that as well. So it's a partnership. I do see that how that can evolve over time. I think right now it makes a lot of sense. That I'm kind of in the middle, but I can see that evolving over time as well.
Yeah, one last kind of context question. How large is the organization in terms of employees?
We are over 100. When I
Okay.
started 2 years ago, I was in the 30s, like maybe 32 or 35, and we're now over 100 employees.
Super. Yeah, that will change. I mean, typically when I hear some variety in terms of where people are structured in reporting, um, you hear I got slotted into marketing usually in like a much bigger company. In this case, because of the way this all came about, it really makes sense the way you're structured right now. And it'll be interesting to see how this role evolves for you, how it evolves
Mhm.
for Authentics, and most importantly, what you and Amy are able to do through this decision and direction for the industry at large. And I'm 100% behind you on the idea of capturing human voice. I really appreciate this idea of helping business storytelling. And,
Mhm.
and, and it's not it's data supported, but not driven by data per se. I mean, the storyline is driven by data, but I love this idea of supporting it with direct audio clips or direct transcripts or even direct video clips, and some of
Mhm.
these other different ways that we can say, here's something that you should be thinking about. Here are two different ways to be thinking about it. Here's what the data says about those two directions. And here's what both of those sound like. Like, I'm just really excited for what you're doing. I am also very pro human. I think as we get really excited about tech, we get too enamored of the tech itself rather than what it can enable. And in this case, it's
Yes.
really connecting with, in a very meaningful, tangible way, a lot of people who you'll never have direct contact with, but their voices matter.
Mhm.
Another thing that I just want to share with you that I really appreciate about what you're doing is that I think it validates the front lines. And you
Oh,
mentioned people on the front line before. They're the ones hearing this voice. They're the ones
yes.
carrying the emotional burden of a lot of these challenging situations. They're the ones trying to make this right. And so the idea that you all are developing technology and philosophy and practice that allows a lot more people to share in that burden and a lot more people to create solutions for those people. I
Mhm.
just can imagine that the people that are implementing what you all are providing and teaching um, probably makes people on the front lines feel like they're supported.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of our goals because they are, I'll give one story here. We were sharing insights with some business leaders, and they got to hear their customers. And at the end, they said, "Our frontline deal with really heavy things. What are we doing to take care of them at the end of the day?" So that's just one little, little example of helping others even realize sometimes the business doesn't understand the nature of conversations that are happening in the business, and just helping to open their eyes to the reality that is happening every day.
Yeah, I mean, short of that clarity and empathy that the actual voice provides, it just starts to look like tickets per hour, calls per hour, whatever.
Yes.
Like, what is our
Yeah. Call
throughput
time.
here?
Yes.
And I
Email
guess
time.
maybe we'll also care a little bit about CSAT along the way. And so it starts to look a lot more like numbers than people. Leslie, this has been super fun. I've really enjoyed it. I learned a lot from you. You've added a lot to this conversation. I'm glad that you've been enjoying the conversations that have preceded you. I hope you continue to enjoy the ones that follow you in this conversation on Chief Evangelist. Before I let you go, the fun standard closer. What is something that you find yourself evangelizing in your own personal life?
Okay, well, Ethan, because I'm a super fan of your podcast, I've thought about this and I've got two. One is if you and I were to meet at a networking event, what would you be guaranteed to hear about?
Yeah.
And that is conscious capitalism.
Yes.
Conscious capitalism is a business strategy that focuses on the purpose of business being for profit, but also for a purpose. And so I evangelize that in any setting, people are going to know I'm a conscious capitalist, and that's my belief. On a personal side, I would likely tell you about F45. It's a fitness program. It's a place with group fitness, and it's perfect for me. And when I what I need in terms of kind of keeping focus on working out, and the time is perfect. It's 45 minutes as well. And I've also enjoyed the connection with people in my community through F45.
Wonderful. I am with you on as soon as you reached out, of course I was going to say yes to hang out and learn more about you and to because I learn every time I talk to people. As I was going to talk to you regardless, but when I saw that A, you were in Indianapolis and B, that you were part of conscious capitalism, I was like, this is 110% yes, not just 100. Anyway, I appreciate you. This has been a joy. If folks want to learn more about you, if they want to connect with you, if they want to talk to you about their own evangelist journey or learn more about yours, because you seem to still be in engagement and research phase. And I think
Mhm.
everyone who's healthy is probably living in that zone. I know I am as well. Where would you send people to learn more about you or about Authenticx?
I would go to my LinkedIn page, Leslie Pagel. You can find me there. Please reach out and connect. Authenticx, authenticx.com. We've got a newsletter you can subscribe to, a contact page, lots of content out there as well.
Super. And that is the word authentic with an X on the end.
Yes. Thank you, Ethan.
Sure.
Authentic with an X.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been a joy. That wraps up this episode of Chief Evangelist. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Ringmaster Conversational Marketing for helping bring these episodes to you. With any thoughts or questions about the Chief Evangelist role, message me on LinkedIn. I'm Ethan Beute, ETHAN BEUTE. For show notes and more of these conversations, visit chiefevangelist.com.